Hey everybody, welcome to another Tuesday night live stream. I'm just going to give it another second for Stormy to jump in and then we'll get going. I hope everybody's had a good week so far. I'm actually just getting over being sick. I caught a cold or something like that over the weekend, so I've been dealing with that. All right.
So,
How's it going?
pretty good.
Very nice. So tonight we are talking about self-destructive behavior. Now, the reason why we're talking about this not only because I have BPD and stuff like that, but it's also things that a lot of people do as well, just in their daily lives. So it's a good topic. You don't have to have BPD to do self-destructive behavior. That's not what it's about. However, you know what I mean. You could just be in your normal day-to-day lifestyle and do these sort of things. So it's good to talk about them to learn about them, and then also at the same time, find preventative ways to not do them. So get us kicked off. Thank you. Thank you. Um, so to get us kicked off tonight, self-destructive behavior. What is it? So it's when you repeatedly do things that will harm you physically, mentally, or both. It can range from mild to life-threatening. If you think you're engaging in self-destructive behavior, you probably are. So what is self-destructive behavior? What would be some examples? Well, cutting, that's a big self-destructive behavior. Pulling your hair out, punching yourself, walls or other people or other objects, burning your skin, bruising your body or breaking bones, and other forms of self-destructive behavior may include another person. So things of that nature would be something like not managing or completing different obligations, such as work or school. Like if you have to go to work the next day and you're banging out, or you're drinking the night before to incapacitate yourself from going to work, or not meeting deadlines while you're at work. Same goes for school or any other obligations you may have in the form of like child custody or something like that. If you got to pick up your child the next day or anything like that, and you're getting hammered or doing drugs or something like that, so that way you can't meet your obligations, that's self-destructive. You're supposed to sit there, you're supposed to do these things, but you're letting the needs and wants of the moment overtake you, and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Another thing is not taking care of your own health. I mean, if you're doing any of those things, or you're overeating or not getting enough sleep, those could be considered the same thing. If you're isolating from others, you're not talking to other people, you're just secluding yourself to your room, and you're not doing anything, because human beings are social creatures. So if you're isolating yourself completely and stuff like that, that is self-destructive. It actually is. I had a roommate that was staying here, and he would do that. He would isolate himself up to his bedroom, and he would only come down to use the bathroom. And even if I had other people over the house, like maybe we hung out in the basement where I have a man cave, it would just give him so much anxiety. And you're talking about there's 4 floors separating us, because he was up in like the attic and I was in the basement. Then there's the next level and then the level below that. But it would just give him tremendous amount of anxiety, and he would almost like sit there and listen for like little things to happen around the house just so he can complain about it. Heavy use of drugs and alcohol, another big self-destructive thing. You're over drinking, you're blacking out, you're doing dumb things while you're doing it. You could be hurting yourself while you're doing it. Same with drugs, you know what I mean? You could be taking an exuberant amount of drugs, teeter-tottering between whether you think you're going to overdose and die, but not having the sense of caring in the moment. Those are also things. Excessive gambling is another big one. People will sit there and you'll hear the stories about how they have a little bit of money to work with and stuff like that, yet they're going out and habitually gambling all the time. They're gambling away their life savings. They're gambling away food from their family's table, all that stuff. And the last big thing is having sex without a condom, or just promiscuous sex at all. You know what I mean? Those are definitely risky behaviors and could wind up with serious consequences. Unplanned pregnancy, STDs, like there's just so many things. But they're all risky behaviors that people engage in on a pretty regular basis. So to sit there and think like you have to have a mental illness to do these things, that's not exactly true. a lot of people do these things regularly and don't have mental illness. Some people just like the thrill of it. Like excessive speeding and stuff like that. People could be just driving their car fast. They like the speed, but it is reckless and self-destructive behavior because there's a lot of consequences that go along with that. They do say, though, people who have experienced trauma may self-harm, but not every person who self-harms has experienced trauma. There are people who self-harm just to self-harm. It's a way of like gaining control and having control over your life and stuff like that. Now, childhood trauma plays a big role in a lot of this stuff. If you had a complicated childhood and, there's deep-rooted things like abuse or neglect or abandonment or anything like that, they basically set you up to have these things happen in your life because you don't have real ways of coping with things. You don't have real ways of understanding what's going on, and you didn't have those nurturing figures and stuff to lead you in the right direction. And if you're missing one of those key roles in your life of your parents, you're ultimately going to have that barrier where these things happen. So they did a study, and in that study they found out that histories of childhood sexual and physical abuse were highly significant predeterminers for self-cutting and suicide attempts. During a follow-up, when they gave the subjects the most severe histories of separation and neglect and those with past sexual abuse, they continued being self-destructive. The nature of the trauma and the subject's age at the time of the trauma affected the character and the severity of the self-destructive behavior. Cutting was also specifically related to the disassociation that they go through. Now, in childhood trauma, it contributes to the initiation of self-destructive behavior, but a lack of secure attachment help maintain it. So if you don't have that sense of security in your life and stuff like that, someone to keep you level-headed and grounded, you're going to keep acting on these self-destructive behaviors because you have no one to set you from the right or the wrong. And it doesn't have to be a parental figure. You could find that in a best friend, anything like that. Like Stormy has constantly over the years and stuff like that pointed out my self-destructive behaviors and set guidelines and stuff like that, but also set barriers of what I can and can't do before she's like at the point where like enough is enough. So as long as you have that concrete figure in your life to do those things, you can try to manage what's going on. It's not always going to seek counseling and stuff like that. There are other alternatives, again, which we will talk about. Now, so patients who reportedly attempt suicide or engage in chronic self-cutting are prone to react to current stresses as a return to childhood trauma, neglect, and abandonment. So they say that when you're experiencing trauma in life and stuff like that, you learn how to deal with trauma when you're at a young age. But if your young life is full of trauma, you find ways to deal with it. So you'll find kids that start hurting themselves at a young age or punching holes in the wall. They have anger. They act out in school. They become bullies at school. Those are things that, if not addressed properly at a young age, will manifest into bigger problems when they become adults. I mean, it's essentially how sociopaths and stuff like that are bred. If you think about it, in a home where there's no love and stuff like that, and the child's constantly being abused and neglected and stuff like that, what do you think is going to happen as they get older? They're going to be let out into the world, and they're going to cause pain because they're recuperating from all the pain they were caused when they were younger. Experiences related to interpersonal safety, anger, and emotional needs may come into dissociative episodes and self-destructive behavior. When people are dissociating, that's when they're going to become the most destructive because it's like not a reality in that moment. So they're taking out all that stuff they have in their trauma, and it's playing out, and it's boiling into, at that point, things that get brought out into reality and taken out on other people. And a lot of the time what winds up happening is when that trauma and stuff like that manifests itself within the person, they take it out on somebody else. What winds up happening is the consequences at that point become so dire. They may make a mistake. They may kill somebody. They may hurt somebody or something like that. Or even if they're doing it to their children, they're creating generational trauma that just keeps getting passed down and passed down and passed down. So learning about these self-destructive behaviors and trying to figure out a better way to regulate them and not do them could prevent that. So like your children won't be treated a certain way because you're putting an end to that stigma. You're putting an end to that trauma. And you can give them a better life so that way they pass down a better life and a better life and a better life. Now, self-destructive behavior may act as a temporary distraction or a way of coping with emotional distress, pain, or discomfort. However, the distraction doesn't last, and the self-destructive behavior can become dangerous habit over time. So, for example, when I was younger, I was a cutter. That was my thing. When I would get overstressed, usually when I had to do with like a relationship or something like that, that is what I would run to. And it was mostly done, I would say 90% of the time it was done while I was under the influence of alcohol. So I would drink because I would get upset, and then I would self harm. And by self harming and stuff like that, in the moment, it was a pain that I could control while everything else around me was falling apart. And that's the way I looked at it. And over the years and stuff like that, and figuring things out, most of those things that I was doing was to have that control. So if I was drinking or something like that, I was getting drunk, but I was doing it to myself. If I was going out and having random hookups and stuff like that with women I wouldn't even like normally look at on a regular basis, I was doing it to punish myself. Or, with the cutting, I was doing it because with the cutting, you can control the amount of pain you inflict on yourself. Whereas you can't control the person that you're in love with cheating on you. I mean, it happens, and you're going to feel distraught about it. And it feels like the world's like falling in on itself around you. But, there's nothing you can really do to prevent that at that point. If it happened, it happened. So that was just a way that I found to find control when I was younger, when I felt like my entire life was out of control. But many people who engage in self-destructive behavior try to hide this behavior from others because they feel ashamed or embarrassed by it. Most people that are doing it for the reason of like control or something like that, or they don't know how to regulate their emotions properly, don't put it in places where they flaunt it. It's the attention seekers and stuff like that are the ones that really like will put it in places so that people will notice. But me, for example, like I always did it on like my upper arm where nobody would see it. I mean, I rarely ever had my shirt off, in public or anything like that. I wasn't like swimming or anything like that. But if I did, people didn't know me even to this day because, I have extensive scarring, that when they see it and stuff like that, it kind of like turns heads. I've noticed like when I've been in relationships before, like I'll go to a family gathering, they'll ask me to go in the pool or something like that. And I'm hesitant about doing so because I don't want to explain that part of my life. You know what I mean? It's something that hasn't happened in a decade, but you know what I mean? Like you're talking about opening up those things that it's not really worth talking about. I talk about them freely to help other people, but to sit there and explain to just a random stranger or something, like if you're at a party where those things would come up, it's kind of embarrassing. Like I'm not ashamed that those things happened because that was the way that I pushed through and wound up being where I am currently. But at the same time, you know what I mean? It's one of those things that I do regret, especially like being a parent and stuff like that. A quick story is that, obviously my daughter's going to see me with my shirt off and stuff like that. So she, naturally will have questions about that. And she has. And that was going to be something that I wanted to explain to her earlier, later in life, when she could fully understand kind of what I was going through and stuff like that. And, not so much when she's younger and doesn't really understand it. But unfortunately, the privilege of explaining that to her was taken from me when someone else informed her what had happened. So then I had to sit down with her and have a talk about how I was sick at the time. These things happened long before she was born. And it's just something that I have to live with. Again, preferably I would have done this later in life, but that's just not the card I was dealt in that moment. But she understands it the best that she can. Again, it's not something I'm proud of, but if I can give her a lifestyle and love and stuff like that so she doesn't have to feel those types of emotions and stuff like that, then I guess that's the positive that comes out of all of it. Stormy, did you want to add anything to what we have so far?
Yes.
I think you cut out there. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep, I can hear you.
I think that procrastinating is a big self-destructive behavior that's really not looked at as self-destructive, but it is. Taking on more things than you can handle, things like that are also self-destructive behaviors. I would say the majority of us have probably had self-destructive behaviors in our life, or still do, and not really even realize that, we have them. It doesn't always have to be something major. It can be like watching too much TV, not taking care of yourself nutritionally, not keeping yourself hydrated, things like that. It all can be self-destructive to your emotional and mental well-being as well as your physical well-being. So I just wanted to say that, it doesn't have to necessarily just be something traumatic. It can be these other little small things that can end up being something big.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't always have to be like the self harm and stuff like that. Like in some way, you are harming yourself, even with the procrastinating and stuff like that. Depending on what you're procrastinating, I mean, you could be procrastinating, I'm going to get healthier one day, or I'm going to quit smoking one day. But if you're still doing those things, I mean, that is detrimental to your health. So even if it doesn't seem like it's so in your face obvious, like obviously hurting yourself, there are a lot of things that people do that are self destructive behaviors. There are. Now, if you're looking to know the signs on if a family member of yours or anyone close to your circle or something like that is doing self-destructive behaviors, they listed out a couple of the signs for it. Some would be like if they're always wearing long sleeves or pants, regardless of the weather. They might be trying to hide certain things, if all of a sudden they're getting unexplained scars all the time or fresh cuts. You know what I mean? Those are big things with the self-harm aspect of it. Another thing would be if they're neglecting their responsibilities, they're not showing up to where they need to be, they're doing poorly at work, like Stormy said, procrastinating, if they're not taking care of their health, if they're, not meeting social commitments. Maybe they were going out bowling with you every week and now all of a sudden they're not, and there's no reason for it or anything. They could be withdrawing themselves. That could be a sign of it. They start expressing like helplessness whenever they address with a problem. Say, hey, can you mow the lawn today? Oh, I just can't. Like, I'm sick. Like, I'm like always sick. I'm not feeling so well, like in my head. Like, those are different things that these things are occurring. Those are the primary things you want to look at. You'll know when somebody's going through it because you'll see them going from being one way to a completely different person. Like, I'm sure, Stormy could attest that when I go through my self-destructive behaviors and stuff like that, especially if it comes to like drinking or something, there's a clear difference as opposed to talking with a rational sense and stuff. So like if I were to drink on, let's just say, a Friday night, I would withdraw myself for the rest of the weekend. And I know after all the years I've been friends with her and stuff like that, she knows, like, even if she wanted to like tell, if I said to her, okay, like I'm not drinking or anything like that, she could always tell if I did the night before because we talk all day long every day. And then she'll message me Saturday and won't get a response. So by all these years now, you know what I mean? She knows, okay, I know what happened. And it's not like it sits there and she's like constantly checking on me, like, are you alive? Are you okay? You okay? Like she knows, like, I know what happened last night. So, when you're around somebody long enough, or even talking to somebody long enough, you're going to pick up on these little things and you're going to know when they're starting to regress, when they're going to start falling, those types of things. Like that was a huge thing, like I said, with me, the drinking and stuff like that. If I did do it, the next day, all I would want to do is withdraw. I would go through my normal routines and stuff like that and go through like just sitting on the couch, watching the same shows over and over again to deal with like the anxiety, or, I know I have to drink this amount of Gatorades and stuff like that, or I have to try to take as many naps as I possibly can that day to try to like push the panic out. Because if not, I know at some point during that day, I'm going to get hit with feels like I'm having a heart attack. And it's so intense, like I like lock up and stuff like that. And it actually is very painful. I know most of it's in my head, but there's been other times, I was actually a big drinker when I got out of the Navy. Because I was miserable in the Navy. I was also going through a divorce and stuff like that. So I was killing about a fifth of Stoli a day. I would wake up in the morning, drive to the liquor store after I got my bearings, pick up a fifth of Stoli and 2 Green Monsters, and that's what I would spend the rest of the day doing when I first got out. And it lasted a couple months. And then, I joined my current job and I started going to college to get my life together. But then I went through alcohol withdrawal. And it was the first time in my life and only time that I really went through that. And, the shaking and like feeling like my skin was burning and not sleeping and stuff like that, it was terrible. And it lasted a couple days. And I literally felt like I was dying. And I just wasn't taking care of myself. But, obviously with the help of good friends and, getting myself into school and having responsibilities and setting goals and stuff like that, I got away from that lifestyle. So it wasn't happening like that. But to get us back on topic, people dealing with like self-harm or self-destructive behaviors typically experience painful emotions. They may withdraw from friends or family or express feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness to those around them, and they exhibit dramatic shifts in mood or impulsive behavior. So, especially someone with BPD, we feel emotions way more intensely than a normal person does. It's either black or white. There's like no gray center, especially when you're starting to dissociate. So someone may come up to me, we could be having a normal conversation, and then all of a sudden I may say something and they look at me in a strange way, and I can almost like feel their emotions. Like that's what it feels like. I'm like reading them, every inch of them, like to the point of the way they look around when they're talking to you, to their hand movements, to everything. Like I'm constantly reading everything that's going on. And just the slightest, maybe like from a usually open conversation, could start hinting to, what did I say? What's going on? Are they mad at me? Something like that. And then you start over analyzing and stuff like that. And maybe you said something stupid, especially when it comes to text messages, because you can't get emotions through all the time. A lot of the time when you're texting, it's like emotionless. So a lot of people like myself use emojis to communicate what they're feeling. It makes it have emotions in it, but some people don't text like that, and they're very like to the point. So it leaves room, especially with borderline, for a lot of interpretation to happen in that moment. And you interpretate something, and you're waiting for them to text back, and you're just sitting there waiting, and then the clock starts running. And maybe you get a text back that you don't like. So you deal with that emotion in a more painful level, and then you immediately run to your self-destructive behavior. Immediately. So for example, this last Friday, what wound up happening was I was asked out on a date. I decided to go out on a date, and I walked around for a while and stuff like that. And what wound up happening was, everything was fine with it. Everything was cool. Very, very nice person, very caring, very sweet. Talking. And then when the date ended, I didn't really feel the connection anymore. But I immediately, in my head and stuff like that, started playing it out. Like, I don't want to hurt this person. I don't want to do that. Like, I'm definitely not ready for a relationship. Like, it's just all the stuff that goes with it, worrying about cheating or overanalyzing situations and stuff like that. I just kept running it through my head and running it. And by the time I got home, I just immediately ran back. I was like, I'm just going to drink tonight. I didn't have my daughter. She was with her mom, everything like that. I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to drink tonight. I'm going to get out of my head. So I'm immediately running back to that self-destructive behavior because, as I learned in therapy, relationships are the thing that always push my BPD. But the definition of insanity, you keep thinking that next time it's going to be different, but it's not. It never is. It's always changing. And I notice that when I'm talking to somebody or anything like that, or attempting to go back in that arena, I change. And I don't like the person that I become. So that's the big problem with it. And then I go back to doing those self-destructive behaviors. It's just one of those things that I don't know if I'll ever be able to get over and deal with, which is fine because I don't mind being alone whatsoever. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I actually enjoy it, so it's not like it's a bad thing. Creature comfort's great and all, but it's not an end all. You don't need it. I mean, the one thing I wanted in life was a child, which I have, so as far as that goes, I don't really need much more than that. So you have to learn what gets you in that arena, what makes you do these self-destructive behaviors. And then if you can eliminate the source, you'll be less likely to start doing them again. You know what I mean? If you think about it, and the way that I learned about it is that, so when I was younger, I would self-harm. We talked about that before. Why did I self-harm? The root of it was because of failed relationships. So dig a little bit deeper with that. I didn't have a relationship with my mother because she abandoned me when I was younger. So it all stems back to these things. And then not having luck with the partners that I chose and stuff like that, with the cheating and the lying and all that, it created these environments. And my way of dealing with that trauma was to do that or to drink. And I didn't realize it until I started getting help and learning these triggers and stuff. But then think, why is it that these things haven't happened in such a long time? Why haven't I self-harmed in such a long time? Because I don't have that toxicity in my life anymore. I'm not in relationships. I'm not being cheated on. I'm not dealing with those sort of things. So through therapy and stuff like that, that's what I learned. And by completely staying away from that, because you got to think, I've been single for about 7 years now, those things aren't happening. And it's strictly because of that. And I'm much happier in life, and I've come such a far way, and I've succeeded in a lot of things and done a lot of the things that I didn't think were possible because I took out the thing that was triggering me to backslide. So, individuals who are in self-destructive behavior, the best thing you could do, and the point of that story, was to speak with a healthcare professional, a therapist, go to your local mental health ward, at the hospital, anything like that. Because if you don't get on a treatment plan or learn effective coping skills, you're never going to get out of that habit. You're going to keep doing those self-destructive behaviors. It's just going to keep going. You're never going to find a way to break the cycle. And if I didn't go and get the help and stuff like that, that's exactly what would have kept happening. I would have kept doing that. And what kind of a father could I be if I'm not going to get help and provide the best parenting that I possibly can for my child? So, it takes a lot to sit there and admit that you're wrong and that you're doing things that aren't healthy for you and things that, potentially are eventually going to kill you. It takes a lot to admit those things. Even now, to talk to the public and stuff like that about my history, my very chaotic history, it takes a lot to get that stuff out. But when you get it out and you realize what you were doing wrong and you realize how destructive that was, not only to yourself, but the people surrounding you, then you could do something about it and you create a lot healthier bonds in your life. You start surrounding yourself with good people, not bad people who are influencing you to stay in the drain. And that's how you get the help for it. Certain mental health conditions, though, such as depression or eating disorders, they may make a person feel as if their life is completely out of control. But people with conditions like this engage in a lot of self-harm, and they feel, again, it's because they need to feel some sort of control in their life. So people with, let's just say, an eating disorder, you actually find them throwing up their food and stuff like that. They're controlling their intake. They have to eat because they're hungry, but they're throwing up their food and stuff like that because they want to keep their weight down because they're self-conscious about how they look. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But it all boils down to control. That you're doing these things to be in control of life. But to believe you're in control of your life is just insanity. You can control aspects of your life, but you cannot be completely in control of it. There's always going to be variables and things that pop up and happen in life that you can't control. But what you can control, 100%, is how you react to them and what you do to rectify them, which is why we've talked about in several of these videos. A big thing for me was my ex. Whenever I would get a message from her or something like that, it would set me off. It would put me in a bad way. I think we talked about this last week. So I set it to a specific ringtone. And now when I hear that ringtone go off, or we talked about it in our DBT last Wednesday, you rest, you analyze what's going on, think about a possible solution or all the possible outcomes of what can happen by having the conversation, and then with a clear as you can mind, go forward with it calmly and just get it done and out of the way. It doesn't have to evolve in anger and stuff like that. They aren't making you angry. You're making you angry. They're not making you drink. You're making you drink. And a lot of people don't take responsibility for the things that they're doing in life. And that's the problem. They're blaming it on somebody else. She got me upset today. It made me drink. He was mean to me today. It made me go self-harm. No, you made you do that. And a lot of personal responsibility needs to be taken in order to step up and overcome these things. Because if you refuse to take responsibility for the things in your life, you're never going to be able to be in control of them. You're never going to be able to correct them. Stormy, you have anything to comment on that?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay. So basically a summary to bring us to a close on the subject and stuff like that. A summary of it is self-destructive behaviors can range from a person causing physical harm to themselves to thinking about hurting themselves. In most cases, this behavior is a response to, again, painful emotions. Individuals with certain mental health conditions have a higher risk of these self-destructive behaviors, and those who have experienced trauma in life are more likely to engage in it. But just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean you have to do these things. And just because you don't have a mental illness doesn't mean you won't do these things. It's the stigma that people like to sit there and talk about and say, just because you have a mental illness, you're self-destructive. That's not always the case. Everybody has lapses in life where they do things they probably shouldn't be doing. That's just the reality of the situation. I've come across so many people in life and stuff like that do there's people that just sit there and just overeat. They're overindulging in soda and stuff like that, knowing full well it's going to happen. There's other people in life who sit there and chain smoke, who go to the gym all the time and stuff like that, but just smoke like 2-3 packs of cigarettes a day. That is a self-destructive behavior. That's considered that. You know the risk that you're taking when you're doing it. But these same people, because they're not taking accountability for what they're doing in life, are the same people that'll sue the cigarette company when they get cancer. You have to take ownership. You have to take the things you're doing in life and own it, or you're never going to be able to fix it. It's just the reality of it. And, everybody's got that specialness to them. Everybody's important. Every life is important. And you have to take care of yourself. A lot of people talk about, too, when it comes to like self-harm and stuff like that, just because you self-harm, it doesn't make you suicidal. It doesn't make you do that. And there's a big misconception with that, because people will sit there and they'll say, oh, he was cutting himself. He obviously wants to kill himself. Absolutely not. I actually have only ever thought about killing myself once in my entire life, but yet I had cut myself maybe 20-something times. There's a big difference. It was never with that intent. It was more of a control thing, not a I want to die thing. The only time I ever felt like I wanted to die is when I lost in child custody court, because that was just a tremendous loss for me. But I took it as if she was never coming back, because that's what my BPD was like telling me in my head. Obviously, that wasn't the case. I see her every other weekend, and I talk to her on the phone daily. It's just not that. But in that moment, I was dealing with more trauma, because it was a big thing for me. But when people self-harm and stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that. When people sit there and drink in excess, it doesn't necessarily mean it's because they want to die. It's because they're using it for a reason. Like when I drank, it was to block out everything that was going on. Like a big thing for me that I used to say all the time is that, and I have to say that I stole it from Trailer Park Boys, but when I would drink and stuff like that, and I didn't know, what I wanted to do in a situation or anything like that, I would drink and I'd just be like, I'll just let the liquor do the thinking and we'll just figure out what's going on. I did that actually a lot of times too. Or when I become indecisive and stuff like that, like the other night when I had left that date, I didn't know if I wanted to go back to doing that self-destructive behavior because I hadn't done it in so long. I was just like, I don't know. And I actually flipped a coin. So I can be extremely indecisive, and a lot of it, like I feel like in my life, like I need somewhat of control, like, or someone to be somewhat in control of me. I operate better when I'm expected to do something or I have a routine or something like that. Another example would be like with my current job. My last boss was so laxed and didn't care about anything, and I found myself slacking off and not doing like my daily stuff, spending more time on just doing other things. And then now that my other boss is back and he's very like on you all the time, I see myself doing a lot more and getting a lot more done because I kind of need that authoritative figure to tell me what's right and wrong. It's not that I don't know what's right and wrong, but that's my way of dealing with it because I know what is expected of me and I'm on a routine and a schedule and I stick to it. It's the same reason with Stormy and stuff like that. Like we keep in contact every single day, and she'll always check in and make sure I'm meeting my quotas and my responsibilities, whether it comes to the book or just things I have to do and stuff like that. And it keeps me motivated, reminds me that I have to do these things, and then gives me a purpose to go forth and do them. Another way of doing these things, just keeping a list every day. I used to keep on the house, like in the dining room, I had a list of all the things I needed to get done during the week. And it was a sense of accomplishment when you would come home and be able to check these things off and have them done. That you're doing what you're supposed to. It keeps you in a healthy routine. What do they say? What's that saying? It's idle hands are the devil's plaything. If you're not doing anything, then you're going to wind up doing these self-destructive behaviors. It's just the way it goes, unfortunately. So with that being said, we're going to bring this to a close. I will not be able to do DBT tomorrow. I just got way too much going on right now, and my dad came up to visit and stuff like that, so I want to spend some time with him. So we won't be doing DBT tomorrow. However, on Thursday, we will be doing that. And Thursday, for those who are joining for the first time and stuff like that, we do this at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. And then Thursdays, we do this. We're going through Paradise Reborn, which is my second book. And in that, I read the chapter and then I go over little Easter eggs and stuff like that to give you guys like a greater insight as to how I came up with these ideas and such. So this Thursday, we are doing chapter 4, which is called All Things Considered. That's the name of the chapter. I got a bunch of good Easter eggs to talk about and stuff like that. I did say last week that I was going to do chapters 4 and 5 because of Thanksgiving being next Thursday. However, I'm going to alter that just because things are getting busy for me at work. It's just that time of the year. I'm only going to do chapter 4 this week. And instead, next week, since Thanksgiving is Thursday, I'm actually going to do the reading on Wednesday. So something to look forward to there. And we will do chapter 5 Wednesday. Next Tuesday, for our next healing, when we get onto that, is going to be about alcoholism. A lot of people can relate to that. I can relate to that a lot in my life. I was surrounded by it most of my life. And, I was one myself as well. So there's a lot of things to talk about. The signs, treatments, the consequences, some AA horror stories and stuff like that. I'll give some of my craziest moments with it, and then obviously the consequences that go along with it, because it's not to promote alcoholism. It's to talk about the terrible things that happen when you're doing it. It's healing, not, promoting bad things. We're trying to get away from doing self-destructive behaviors, not encouraging them. So with that being said, thank you everybody who came out tonight, for all the support, all the likes that you guys gave me. It's such an honor to do this for you guys. The people that have reached out to me earlier today and stuff like that, because they were excited about tonight. Thank you so much for joining. And if you missed it, you can catch it on YouTube for a replay and stuff, along with all of our other Tuesday night healing videos. The link is on my TikTok. And again, if you want to check out the book that we're going to be reading Thursday to get a jump start on it, you can always go on Amazon and get it. It's 99 cents for the Kindle for both of them. Or again, like I always say, if you want the hardcover, the soft cover, it's a little more because that's just what Amazon charges. I don't really have any control for that. But thank you all again. And I will see you again in 2 days on Thursday.